Okay, let's get a little bit more into the personification of 9/11 via Donald Trump and how that relates to the Wizard of Oz. First, the North Tower was the first building to be hit when American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into it at 8:46 a.m., causing it to collapse at 10:28 a.m. after burning for 1 hour and 42 minutes. At 9:03 a.m., the South Tower was struck by United Airlines Flight 175, and it collapsed at 9:59 a.m. after burning for 56 minutes. In other words, the totality of the 9/11 ritual involving those two towers in New York City on September 11th transpired over 1 hour and 42 minutes. That was the runtime of the event, as it were. And I got into the significance of that as it related to 17 again in a prior video, as that related to Matthew Perry's death and Michelle Trachtenberg's death. They were co-stars in that film, and the plot involved the idea of consciousness traveling into another dimension or being sent somewhere else. It's a time travel plot where Matthew Perry's consciousness is sent back into a younger version of himself, and he's allowed to relive certain events along these lines and then eventually is sent back. Again, it's this idea of severance, or as it's depicted in The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy's consciousness is sent somewhere else by a tornado, which might as well be the portal that is 9/11, right? The way they portrayed that eye in between the two towers and the sphere of consciousness being sent through the pupil. In terms of what the screen that is the eyes would perceive through the screen on that day and the effect that it would have, merging consciousness with something else entirely, a new consciousness, as it were, produced via this ritual. Michelle Trachtenberg dies on 2/26/2025, which is the same day that the World Trade Center was originally bombed in 1993, and she dies at 39. Her character in the Buffy series is known as the Key, and her character's blood is capable of opening a dimension into another reality, right? Symbolically, her death in relationship to the blood moon total lunar eclipse was powering the opening of another dimension, as it were, powering, sending consciousness into another realm, severing the mind, creating an altar that will flip forward and take over the mind. There are many different ways that you can portray it, but for all intents and purposes, that tornado takes Dorothy's mind into a similar new dimension where everything is colorful now. It's not black and white anymore. She's been transferred somewhere else. And the runtime is 1 hour and 42 minutes, the exact same duration as the September 11th, 2001 event. And because Donald Trump is the personification of that event, he is 9/11 infused into a person, and his first term is that first plane striking the first tower, while his second term is now the second plane striking the second tower, which leads to the controlled demolition of those two towers eventually, in terms of what symbolically is taking place with the United States of America. We could expect him to be associated with the Wizard of Oz. And he is very clearly in terms of being used as that which will reveal the man behind the curtain. As Abramovich stated it, he is the magician who will wake everyone up. You are Dorothy, and he is sending your mind into a different realm, severing your consciousness from its natural state and transferring it into this hybrid digital biological construct where the mind merges directly with the screen, which is why they put that monolith at ground zero of this event, because symbolically they were showing you that, yes, the monolith is the movie screen on one level, but that's what your eyes are as well. And your eyes will merge with this screen very literally through this ritual. And as a part of the personification of 9/11, symbolically, Donald Trump is revealing the man behind the curtain. That has been his entire campaign. He claims to be exposing the deep state, exposing the truth about what's really going on in the world, and he's the one who's revealing it all. But the catch is, the reveal was planned into the ritual all along. This is an artificial revealing of the man behind the curtain. It is controlled. In that way, it's a controlled demolition of controlled opposition. And the movement that was created through Donald Trump, MAGA, QAnon, will serve the purpose of allegedly exposing the man behind the curtain and being discredited at the same time that it does that. So, in the future, any kind of truth that is contained within what that movement is saying will be forever discredited, and you will not be able to discuss it because that red hat will be synonymous with the swastika in terms of what they represent. If you bring up anything related to MAGA, it will be the same as bringing up the Nazis. Anyways, this is why The Wiz has this scene symbolically depicting the ritual that would take place in New York on September 11th, 2001. They have the two towers and the sphere portal with the Z where the actual sculpture is. This is the scene that is being recreated in The Wiz, where you have the sphere, which is consciousness, and then you have this larger construct that is depicting an eye. In other words, consciousness will be dropped through the portal, like they depict it to you in Contact, and be sent somewhere else through this ritual. And this is the ideogram over here, where the rubble would blend in with it to the point where they couldn't recover the sculpture. Because it's telling you that, yes, these two towers are going to be destroyed and turned into this via our idea that we have created here, via our ritual, and it will send your consciousness through a portal, metaphorically speaking, somewhere else. It will sever your consciousness and begin the process of creating this new altar that will change your personality, change the very fabric of your own existence and the way you perceive it. You will merge with something else that we have created for you. And indeed, this goes back to the idea of extrasensory perception and telepathy, because at its core, this is something envisioning an image in its mind of what it would like to see. Its imagination creates this idea for what it wants the world to look like and how we will interact with that world, and it beams it directly into our mind. That which is in control of this world might as well have been standing right across from you and telepathically sent an image into your mind through this ritual, right? That's what it is. And for that reason, they obscure the idea of telepathy and what that really entails, because then you're confused about the fact that this is actually taking place on some level without any kind of power involved, or any kind of special ability being involved. This is taking place through the externalization of human technology, through the externalization of biological technology into what we call technology. In that way, it's externalized telepathy, and these images are sent into your mind through the screen, and all the ways that they encode their subconscious subliminal propaganda into what you perceive through the screen. And again, that is why the monolith is there. It's a form of evolution that they're depicting to you, where your eyes, as a screen themselves, merge with the screen that they present to you, which is really an ability that you already have, naturally designed to communicate in this way via images with other people, and simply your intention, which is how you are controlled. They mimic this process and control your mind through it because it's a process that is natural in design. It's just been changed into something that you can touch in the physical world. Okay, my apologies. It took me a long time to explain the 1 hour and 42 minute part of the runtime for The Wizard of Oz. There's so much more I want to get to. First, I think let's go to Aleister Crowley, who has the infamous pamphlet Liber Oz. And Liber Oz is also known as Book 77. There is this natural association between Oz and 77 because, as you can see here from the original artwork on Frank Baum's book, Z is 77. Do you see that? You have a 7 here and then an upside down 7. They come together to form the Z, but it's 77. And this could be viewed as the portal, right? So you have the idea of 77 being associated with a portal in terms of the Wizard of Oz. So going back to this image, it's actually 77 where the sphere is in the real image as it relates to the Twin Towers and this whole ritual that took place. 77 associated with the sphere or the portal that is consciousness being sent somewhere. Liber Oz, also known as Book 77, is a single-page declaration authored by the English occultist Aleister Crowley in 1941. This text, initially published as a leaflet or broadside, delineates the fundamental rights of individuals as viewed through the lens of Thelema, the spiritual and social movement which Crowley founded in the early 20th century. Thelema emphasizes the principle of individual will as its core tenet. Liber Oz is divided into 5 paragraphs, each addressing different aspects of human rights: moral, bodily, mental, sexual, and the right to safeguard freedoms, including the controversial assertion of the right to commit tyrannicide. This blew my mind the first time I read it because we're back in the context of a potential second assassination attempt on Donald Trump, as potentially depicted in the series Paradise, where you see Liber Oz is associated with 77 and the Wizard of Oz, and the Wizard of Oz is directly associated with the 9/11 ritual via its runtime, 1 hour and 42 minutes, in addition to all of the other rituals that were connected to 9/11 through the Wizard of Oz franchise and all the films they've made along these lines, especially The Wiz. And then you have Crowley writing Liber Oz with one of the fundamental principles being the right to tyrannicide. And think of that in terms of how Donald Trump is being depicted, right? He's being depicted as a tyrant. He's being depicted as the 21st century Hitler, the new fascist dictator. And in the context of what Crowley is saying here, symbolically, the mind is justified in accepting the assassination of the tyrant. It's directly connected to Oz, in other words, and directly connected to the Wizard of Oz in that way, and directly connected to the personification of 9/11 that is Donald Trump and the whole ritual. that he is symbolically involved with. Meaning, he could be falling as a tower himself in an assassination attempt that is successful this time around. Maybe this is all symbolic, like the whole thing has been up until this point, and it's just an assassination of the character Donald Trump that is taking place in the media, and there won't actually be a real assassination. But I don't know. This is very interesting, because when you go to tyrannicide, it is quite literally the killing or assassination of a tyrant or unjust ruler, purportedly for the common good, and usually by one of the tyrant's subjects. And I'm sure all of these people who actually waste their time reading Aleister Crowley would say that this is symbolic of something that you do spiritually to assassinate the tyrants that are, ruling over you and don't have any right to. I'm sure they would say something along those lines. I'm not interested in anything that this guy actually had to say, okay? Because we know the source of where it's coming from. But I think this could be very literally pointing to an intentional ritual involving the assassination of the tyrant, Donald Trump. I mean, it's a blatant association between Liber Oz and the Wizard of Oz and 77. Which I realize doesn't carry any weight yet, because I have not got into all the 77 stuff. So let's do that now. First, who were Amalek and the Amalekites? The Amalekites, descendants of Amalek, were an ancient biblical nation living near the land of Canaan. They were the first nation to attack the Jewish people after the Exodus from Egypt, and they are seen as the archetypal enemy of the Jews. The nation of Amalek is long gone, but they live on as the internal enemies that we each battle on a daily basis. This is the 2025 United States Electoral College vote count on January 6, 2025. First, note the name of the Democratic candidate, Kamala Harris. All you have to do is rearrange the letters, take the K from here and put it here, and it's Amalek, which is the symbolic depiction of Amalek. I mean, yeah, it's an E instead of an A, right? But subconsciously, that's what it's evoking in your mind. In other words, the 2025 United States presidential election was Donald Trump securing victory over the Amalekites, over Amalek. And look at the amount of electoral votes that she had. 226, or 226. The date of the original bombing of the World Trade Center, that was the origin of this 9/11 ritual, and the same day that Michelle Trachtenberg would die just a few weeks later, as that related to the total lunar eclipse blood moon, which this presidential candidate was born under and is infused with the energy of. He's the moon child. So the moon child declares victory over Amalek, symbolically speaking. And it evokes the symbolic destruction of those two towers, which is the two terms that will destroy America and everybody who lives here, essentially, right? So it's a victory over the population of America in that way. This is a speech that Donald Trump gave on August 25th, 2016. August 25th, 2016 was 77 years after the release of The Wizard of Oz, the original film in 1939. Trump gives a speech on this day, 77 years after the release of that film. And this is what he says at the beginning.
It is terrific to be back in New Hampshire. Really a very special place to me because this is where I won my first primary, my first victory. Who knows?
Donald Trump has his first victory in terms of his political career in New Hampshire, and 77 years after the release of The Wizard of Oz, he's back in New Hampshire giving a speech along these lines, pointing back towards the idea that that is his origin. He's the Moonchild who is the personification of 9/11. He's revealing the man behind the curtain in this scripted ritual where this new world comes into being by intentionally exposing the old world and how it's not working and all of the corruption that's going on. And he is that character who was chosen to do this, infused with this eclipse energy. He temporarily covers the country and the world to produce these changes. And then once he is past it, the new world will be in existence. Symbolically, anyway. Then there's this. Enabled by prominent Republicans and motivated by his most devout followers, Donald Trump spent the 77 days between November's presidential election and the deadly Capitol insurrection on January 6th, peddling a lie about voter fraud invented to help him subvert American democracy. There was precisely 77 days between the election in 2020 and the scripted, staged, quote-unquote, insurrection at the United States Capitol. 77 Oz. And this is all a part of how Donald Trump is metaphorically revealing the man behind the curtain. He's revealing the truth of what's going on, revealing the voter fraud as one example. And then he, in combination with all of the clones that exist within the MAGA QAnon ecosystem, provide the historical paper trail through their controlled opposition actions to plausibly state the idea that this movement began domestic terrorism in the United States of America. In other words, it's a scripted fake revealing of the man behind the curtain being done through Donald Trump in a way that will make him the metaphorical last president. Symbolically, he's the last true American president because he is going to destroy what that office was and how it used to function. Also, it just so happens that Donald Trump received 77.3 million votes in the 2024 United States presidential election. 77, Oz. 9/11, 1 hour and 42 minutes long. This is the second term or the second plane flying into the second tower before the controlled demolition. Then, obviously, there is American Airlines Flight 77, which is the plane that allegedly flew into the Pentagon on September 11th, 2001. Now, if Donald Trump is the personification of 9/11, and they have encoded that ritual into his person symbolically, to the point where, as the Moonchild presiding over the Great American Eclipse, his two presidential terms are those two planes flying into those two towers that then collapse in a controlled demolition. Well, logically, that personification should extend to the other two planes that were involved on that day in 2001. So here you have the 77 Oz connection to this plane that allegedly hit the Pentagon, and you can see how Donald Trump as Oz 77 is striking the United States of America, which is represented by the Pentagon itself, right? That is emblematic of the United States empire, militarily speaking. And Flight 93 went down in Pennsylvania, which was the key battleground state in the 2024 presidential election, and is the state where the first alleged assassination attempt took place. And you could view those passengers on Flight 93 symbolically as MAGA, as this sacrifice that will take place as a part of this larger ritual where all of the collective energy of the people who think Donald Trump is real, who are charging this magical ritual, will be sacrificed. Their character will be assassinated through what they do to Donald Trump and the movement in general, or at least what they attribute to it. Because as the story goes, those passengers stood up to the terrorists who were hijacking the flight and caused it to crash. It didn't reach its intended target. And that's sort of what's going on with the movement behind Donald Trump. As he is Oz, he's 77, flying into the Pentagon, destroying the empire from within. He breaches the Pentagon, in other words. I mean, that's playing out in real time right now, where he is destroying world trade through the tariffs, and that's those two towers that is the World Trade Center, controlled demolition of world trade. Some birthday, Trump turns 77 under shadow of charges with threat of more to come. Donald Trump, the former U.S. president, spent his 77th birthday on Wednesday consolidating his lead in the Republican primary race for 2024 under the shadow of federal criminal charges and bracing for further legal bombshells. In a court in Miami, Florida on Tuesday, Trump pleaded not guilty to a 37-count indictment alleging that he unlawfully hoarded national security documents when he left office and lied to officials who sought to recover them. So Donald Trump turns 77, Oz, and he has this case filed against him that is doing all of the things that I just went into there, right? This is adding to the list, historically speaking, that they will point at, indicating just how bad Donald Trump was, just how evil of a fascist dictator he was, and how he didn't follow any of the law. He was a criminal. They tried to impeach him twice, and they tried to indict him on all of these charges, and he said all of this stuff that is just repugnant, and he's just an all-around evil person. That's what's being crafted in the mind for the history books. Because that will tie into the Hitler narrative, right? That will tie into the MAGA red hat being the new swastika. They're slowly building this narrative over time. And what they are doing through him right now in terms of the script is only adding to that, right? This man is out of control. He's dismantling everything that we've ever known. He's destroying America. All of this will be methodically listed line by line in the history books when it's all said and done. A deflated Trump, now twice indicted at 77, some birthday. Incidentally, the 77th anniversary of the release of The Wizard of Oz was in 2016. It was August 25th, 2016. 77 years after the release in 1939, which was just a few months before Donald Trump was elected president the first time. Again, another 77 link to Oz and Donald Trump. This is interesting. The original books by L. Frank Baum had a character titled Tik Tok, spelled the exact same way as the app that everybody is familiar with, remembering that there was the Tik Tok aspect of this Donald Trump ritual right around his inauguration, where the media was in hysterics about how TikTok was going to be banned in America, and then Donald Trump saved TikTok, or saved time, again relating back to all the similar themes that have been infused into him in terms of science fiction, because it all relates to how he is an instrument through which the fabric of reality itself is being altered. Our perception of that is being altered through this ritual. I mean, that's the key to always keep in mind, but there's this association of TikTok to Oz as well. TikTok is a character who appeared in several Oz books, beginning with Ozma of Oz. He is a machine man controlled by clockwork, which needs to be wound regularly. TikTok is often considered the first robot to appear in literature. Symbolically, that's very interesting. TikTok, the first robot to appear in literature, as that relates to what TikTok, the app, is doing in the context of altering perception, merging with digital technology, and how that relates to time then, and how Donald Trump was essentially a time bridge, symbolically speaking. And then this is an image of TikTok, and it was fascinating to me how it's essentially a sphere, right? When you compare it to the sphere in between the two towers, which is consciousness, you have TikTok, evoking a similar idea, right? TikTok and the head inside the helmet, as it were, which is how this has been described by a lot of people, that this is a head inside a helmet. You have TikTok giving you that imagery as it's depicted in Return to Oz anyway. And go figure, TikTok is back in the news right now because the deadline is coming up, determining whether or not there will be an extension or if somebody's actually going to buy the American version of TikTok. Because tomorrow, April 7th, is 77 days since the inauguration on January 20th. This is the 77th day of Donald Trump's second term, Monday, April 7th. And it just so happens that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is flying to the U.S. today ahead of a meeting with Trump at the White House tomorrow, which is April 7th. So on the 77th day of Donald Trump's second term, he has a meeting in the White House with Netanyahu, which goes back to the Kamala Amalek symbolic victory. Oh, speaking of that 77th anniversary of the release of The Wizard of Oz in 1939, it just so happened that the day before Donald Trump gave that speech in New Hampshire, alluding to his first political victory and how that related to Oz in terms of the personification of 9/11, there were a bunch of tornadoes in Indiana the day before. A state of emergency was declared in Howard County, Indiana, after a large, damaging tornado hit the town of Kokomo Wednesday afternoon, flattening a Starbucks and causing significant damage to dozens of homes and businesses. This major tornado takes place the day before the 77th anniversary of The Wizard of Oz. And Donald Trump is mentioning it on that day, 77 years later, with a couple tweets. And it hits the town of Kokomo, which obviously is a famous Beach Boys song that was released in 1988. So in the lead up to Trump's 77th day in office, this is what took place over the weekend, right? You have the trade war. As a result of the tariffs, the crash in the markets, mass protests, millions of protesters gathered in all 50 states and globally yesterday for coordinated demonstrations against Trump and Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. And then the meeting that I referred to where Netanyahu will be in the White House on that day tomorrow, Monday, April 7th. I wonder what the gift will be this time, if it'll be a golden pager again or something along those lines. If it endures, Donald Trump's decision on April 2nd, 2025 to enact sweeping reciprocal tariffs on U.S. trade partners will go down as one of the greatest acts of self-harm in American economic history. They will wreak untold damage on households, businesses, and financial markets across the world, upending a global economic order that America benefited from and helped to create. There you go, right? That's it in a paragraph. It's the controlled demolition of America itself through the personification of 9/11, Donald Trump. He is the controlled demolition of America. That's what his two terms are, okay? It's right here. None of this is by accident. This is all by design. And that's what they'll leave out of the history books, right? They'll leave out the part where all of this was scripted to transpire. There's nothing new or organic taking place here. This was planned hundreds of years ago. Which is why it's incredibly silly to give your energy to it in any way. Similarly, from the New York Times, Trump's third term talk defies Constitution and tests democracy. This is very intentionally put into the script so that people will get this idea that he is truly coming from the place of being a fascist dictator, because potentially this is playing in to the subconscious subliminal association between Oz, Liber Oz, and tyrannicide, providing the plausible justification to assassinate the tyrant. They're really making it clear that Trump is a fascist through the actions that they have scripted into him. It's designed intentionally for the controlled demolition of America, but I think there's something deeper going on here as it relates to him. Whether that's just the character that they're assassinating through things like this, and in that way it's not actually real, it's taking place in the mind, or they are going to assassinate this character, literally, a tyrannicide. And through all the 77 Oz association to Donald Trump and this whole ritual, that has been subconsciously implanted. Liber Oz 77, the Wizard of Oz, the Portal, and tyrannicide. In the context of the JFK assassination, where Lee Harvey Oswald is the alleged assassin who is then killed by Jack Ruby. Donald Trump then is pictured 1 week after the Super Bowl halftime ritual at the Daytona 500 with his granddaughter in ruby red slippers with the rainbow dress on. Oz 77 tyrannicide. The justified assassination of a tyrant. The Wizard of Oz, the original film, is 1 hour and 42 minutes long. The same runtime as the 9/11 event itself on September 11, 2001. And Donald Trump is the personification of that event, which they depicted in the White House when the contact device is opened and your consciousness via this ritual is dropped through it. It's the same thing depicted between the two towers. The consciousness that is the sphere dropped through the pupil of the eye. A wormhole, black hole opens. sending your mind somewhere else, which might include the actual assassination of this quote-unquote tyrant. Liber Oz and the man behind the curtain. 1 hour and 42 minutes. Symbolic 77s all over things that Donald Trump is doing, pointing towards this Oz association, which is the same thing that everything else is showing you. It's the idea of the portal that is opened through this magic, this ritual that they are conducting here. And this is the false occult awakening that is being artificially promoted as a part of this whole thing. They give you this fake deconstruction of lies and then present you with the truth, thinking you won't even realize what they're doing, that you won't even realize that they planned this reveal into it as well. People all over the world think they're discovering truth on the internet right now, but it's deception from its inception. Yes, there's a lot of truth to be found, but by design, controlled opposition turns it into something else that can be used as a part of this ritual. Going back to The Wizard of Oz, the film, my issue here that I'm having difficulty with is the temptation to describe Donald Trump as the Wizard of Oz or the man behind the curtain. And I keep getting tripped up trying to make the association literal between them in terms of the symbolic narrative. But it just finally occurred to me, after talking for a long time about this, that Donald Trump himself is a version of the Wizard of Oz. He is a presentation that is given to everyone that is the bells and whistles that is being controlled by something else behind the scenes. Something else is pulling the strings, and it is giving us Donald Trump. So it's not that he's the Wizard of Oz, it's he's the puppet on the strings that the wizard is using to create the illusion that will be assimilated into our collective imagination and bring it into existence. Going back to the idea of this being a form of telepathy that's taking place. That image in the mind of that which is in control here is beaming this imagined future into our minds through this propaganda, subliminally and subconsciously. And Donald Trump is a version of the propaganda. He is a person that has been infused with all of these themes that is functioning on levels the conscious mind doesn't perceive until it becomes aware of it. In this way, he is this image, right? This is Donald Trump in the sense that we are being presented with this thing that was crafted so many years ago and with so much malice aforethought that it's designed to destroy the United States of America and create a new world order out of that destruction. And it's presented to us in a way where it has similar themes that you want to say that he's the wizard. But no, Trump isn't the wizard. He's the one that is being manipulated. He's the program, for lack of a better term, right? He was infused with these things that works on the subconscious mind to pull on all of us, to alter the fabric of our perception of reality. It's part of the big show. And yes, there are aspects to the show that involves revealing certain things that are thought to be exposing lies in the same way that it was eventually done to the wizard. But that's only a part of the show. there still is this thing that's transpiring that is beyond our perception, pulling the strings to this whole thing. In the context of that, The Wizard of Oz has a runtime of 1 hour and 42 minutes, the same as the runtime for 9/11, and it was released in 1939 to get that 9339 in there. 93's all over the Crowley stuff. It's on the screen in Contact when they show the device for the first time, as the experiment is about to transpire. And then, obviously, the first World Trade Center bombing took place in 1993, and Michelle Trachtenberg died on 2/26 at 39. As she related to the total lunar eclipse blood moon, which is what infused Donald Trump symbolically with the energy of the moonchild in the first place, presiding over the so-called Great American Eclipse. And the day of the second path of totality on April 8th, 2024, the Trump team released an actual video of his head eclipsing the sun. Like, they're not leaving this mysterious. It's all right out in the open, okay? But through the process of the illusion, your mind is taken from one place into another. They very meticulously place the O, or the portal, over the tornado, because it's representative of what this propaganda does. It's sending your mind somewhere else, severing your consciousness and personality, turning it into something else without your conscious knowledge. Sending it into this new reality, this different dimension. Speaking of tornadoes and what I just said there, in the sequel to Twister, which I think is titled Twisters? I can't remember the actual title of it, but there's a scene in that film where they're hiding from this giant tornado, and they all hide in a movie theater, and the tornado destroys the movie screen. Symbolically, they're showing you the same thing there, what this propaganda through the screen is doing to your mind. It's like an eclipse, the pre-tornado reality and then the post-tornado reality. And there's that eye in the middle of the storm or the tornado where everything's calm, which is like the sun being totally eclipsed by the moon, or vice versa, for those few seconds that it transpires. So I think I got to everything. I'll just leave you with 77 is Oz, and the portal in the context of Liber Oz, or Book 77, and tyrannicide in the context of the assassination of JFK by Lee Harvey Oswald, who was then killed by Jack Ruby, as that relates to the first attempted assassination of Donald Trump in Butler, PA. James Marsden plays JFK in The Butler, who is then assassinated as the US president in the series Paradise, which takes 2 blows to the head, symbolically showing the first attempted assassination and then potentially the second one, which again could be just the metaphorical 2 towers that are his 2 terms. 1 blow and then a second, a symbolic character assassination, or there is a literal assassination coming of Donald Trump, which would send the whole thing into overdrive, as it were, right? I mean, that would be the flux capacitor activating and sending consciousness into a whole new realm where people would explode with energy if something like that took place. Just look at what people are doing to Tesla dealerships right now. That's a version of tyrannicide, right? Justified in the symbolic killing of the tyrant king, Elon Musk, by defacing and burning his cars. The mass protests, all this energy surrounding this. Imagine if they say somebody assassinated Donald Trump. Imagine the sparks that would fly from that. Either way, we're getting the sparks, though, right? It's happening through the potential symbolic assassination. In any event, hopefully you can see very clearly now why 9/11, the Wizard of Oz, and Donald Trump are so closely interrelated. Whether it's overt or subconscious, Liber Oz is associating 77 and the portal and all the other stuff associated with Donald Trump with tyrannicide and the idea of killing the tyrant. Which they will do when all of this propaganda has wrapped up, however the script plays it out, where that red hat he's wearing right here is the new swastika. And it is treated accordingly by society from that point on.